All right. Cheers, everybody.
All right.
Thank you for coming.
Cheers.
Cheers.
I'm gonna sip.
Fair enough.
Just I can't really hold it.
Yeah, this doesn't seem like something you would normally shoot. It's actually very delicious.
Yeah. Wow. I'm surprised.
Yeah.
It really is more like a wine. Than
Yeah. You haven't had it before?
I haven't.
Oh,
no.
nice.
So we're saving it for an occasion. So
Oh.
whenever we go
wow.
traveling, we always bring like 3 to 10 bottles from
The
wherever
Yeah,
we go.
suitcase is loaded up.
I was
with
gonna say
alcohol.
that's like a heavy gift to bring back.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we're lucky. Usually, what happens is we pack a bag inside of the bag.
Right.
Or
And
we
also
end
get
up
that.
buying luggage.
Or we
there.
Yeah.
buy. Yeah.
You ever do that like Filipino or other Southeast Asian thing where it's like a big cardboard box with a ton of tape and just fill it with
I've
liquor?
seen that.
Yeah, yeah.
It's actually hilarious
what I grew
watching
up
them do
with.
that at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
airport,
yeah.
but
Yeah.
You grew up with that?
I grew up with that. Yeah. Like usually it's, to and from California.
Right.
You go to your family's place. They gift you like all the fruits that are over there.
Yeah, yeah.
That you don't have access to over here. And they just like throw a box and you just check it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's so funny. I love seeing that. It's like it's very heartwarming. I'm like, oh, that's going to someone's family,
Yeah.
going to someone's loved ones.
And it goes through like the security and gets like flagged because it's suspicious.
Always,
Always.
always,
Always.
man.
It's a random box with no handle.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Just like
no markings.
yeah, just tape with writing on it in different languages, crossing out. Oh, this is
Yeah.
from last year. Let's just repurpose the tape
Right.
because we cheap
well,
people.
the worst one was what your mom. I still don't know what she gave us. It was literally a brick of white powder,
Oh wow.
and then we had to go through
Yeah,
international
yeah.
security. I didn't even know.
Oh
it was
my
in there.
god.
Do
That
you
was
know what
fun.
it is now?
It's like a type of flour.
Okay,
Like a
yeah.
starch or
Yeah.
something.
But it's
Yeah.
like special, so I was supposed to bring it to my grandma who is like across the country. And we were like passing through because it was on the way to like I think we were going to California and then we were going to somewhere in Asia. And we were like literally just passing through and we were gonna see family for like half an hour or like a couple hours. My mom's like, here, take this. This is for grandma. And I'm like, what is this? She's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And you, like, or they say it and you don't really know what it is because they don't know the translation in
Right,
English
exactly,
and you
yeah.
don't know the actual, word in the mother language.
Yeah.
But it was like just these packs of like white powder that were like super compact. And she also gave me a brick of something.
Yeah.
And I pack it into my bag and I don't think about it. Like, you could check it and it'd probably be less suspicious, but I put it into my carry-on
Yeah.
and they flagged me and they're like, this looks like cocaine.
For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And then they drug tested it and I think they bomb tested it to make sure.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, it's not drugs or, explosives,
Right.
but what is it? And I was like, TSA agent, I'm sorry, I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know the word for it, but I can maybe cook you something with it if you
Yeah.
want. If you wait for like 3 or 4 hours, I can
Yeah.
whip you something up. That's hilarious, though. Yeah. Well, let's get into your intros. So today we have Ron and Jess. Is it Jess or Jessica? What do you prefer?
You can call me whatever.
Okay, we'll go Jess, just to do the one syllable things.
Yeah.
And you guys are in love. You guys are Asians. You guys are successful restaurateurs here in Boston. But
So 2 out of 3, sure.
okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll let people guess which two.
Yeah.
But and we'll let you both guess which two actually. 'Cause
I know
you
which
Oh,
two.
you know.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. But let's start with a bit of your origin story. So I want to start with, you guys both went to UConn, yeah?
Yes.
Which was either a great source of pride or disappointment to your parents. Which one?
I think it was like just moderate. I think
Okay.
my mom had high hopes for me and my sister. My sister went to UConn 1st,
Mhm.
and it was a great source of disappointment at first. But my sister broke the ice, so then I could go too.
Hell yeah.
Without-
Nice,
yeah.
nice. Exactly.
So you have older siblings.
100% the latter.
Oh,
Dad had a PhD.
oh
so-
yeah.
But softened the blow with the whole scholarship honors. Typical Asian.
Very
kind of
nice.
Lucky in that sense. So.
Yeah.
But I think coming out of it, pretty happy that we did. So.
Yeah,
Yeah.
of course, yeah. But so after graduation, you guys both worked in corporate and in biotech and regular people jobs, respectable jobs for a while.
Yeah, normal human people
Yeah.
jobs, where you don't work like 160, 80 hours a week. I worked at Brigham actually here in
Oh,
Boston.
cool. Yeah.
So I actually was a cytogenetic technologist.
Mm.
So easy term way to think about that is basically I would, take your blood sample or whatever sample you gave it to me, render it down and basically do a chromosomal analysis
Ooh.
of, yeah. So That was my old job before we ventured into this rabbit hole of food.
Very cool. And you were doing like
I was selling candy. I mean,
Really?
I had worked for the Hershey
Oh,
company.
cool.
I had an amazing boss, an amazing team, worked from home. Kind of a lot of people are like, why would you
yeah.
give all that up? So, but yeah, I think I was fortunate. You know, I'd say I worked in corporate America, and yes, there's a corporate part of it, but I had great coworkers and kind of managed a product that everyone loves. So.
Yeah, no, I mean that's I think a great starting point for the conversation, which is like why then did you leave? Like why did you choose to go into entrepreneurship, hospitality, like an industry that's everyone's just like, stay away.
Yeah. You know, the funny thing is like most when we talk to prospective restaurateurs, we do say that as well. Like,
Right.
stay away. If you really, really want to do it, then we can talk through it. But it was just like honestly, like we were young and dumb.
Yeah.
But I love the industry and I love what we do now. And like I wouldn't necessarily change what where we are, but I think it was just kind of like we're young, we have the opportunity to go back to our normal day jobs if we find this doesn't pan out. And it was just, I think, an adventure for us.
Why restaurant then? Like
We
it could
loved
be any
food.
adventure.
We
Yeah.
were big foodies back then. And like
Not
from-
anymore. You're like fuck this shit.
I love food, but
Yeah.
the funny thing is when you work so much, it's not as easy to go
Right.
out and eat,
Right,
and
yeah.
when we do, it's like in support and seeing other people, new places open, and
Mhm.
and trying to support them.
Yeah.
But yeah, I forget the original question.
Me too.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Okay, sometimes we have technical difficulties,
Okay.
and that's always a good time for a shot. So what do you
Yay.
got? We have a little bit more immunity. Can you drink kombucha as a pregnant person?
No.
That's what it's a tea or?
Well,
Fermentation.
Oh,
fermentation.
fermentation.
So
Okay,
there might
okay.
be trace amounts of alcohol.
Fair enough. Yep. All right. We're just gonna do the immunity thing, and then we'll do waters once you run out of this.
Cool.
And Ron,
I'll
you're just
sip
gonna be
it so
sipping.
it lasts
Okay.
much
I'm just
longer.
gonna sit.
All right. Perfect. Yeah, but I think the original question has something to do with like why'd you do it, but then it kind of shifted to like why restaurants. But I guess it's you love food, and it was
yeah.
just like a thing at the time where you were like, you know what, we can do it. Like I think a lot of people I've heard have two like business ambitions. Like if you ask like general public, they're like, I always would want to start a restaurant or write a book. Like I think something
Yeah.
about those two seems accessible,
It's very romantic.
Very
romantic, and like, oh, I've been into restaurants, I know how that works, and like I've read a book, I know how to talk, know. And I guess these days also the third would be like start a podcast, which is what we're doing. But I think like I personally think that's probably why there's like a high rate of failure in a lot of these industries, is because like people just think it's so easy and then they just go try it and then it's like, oh wait, like there's actually
I mean, that was definitely, I'm not if you want to jump in, but definitely it for us in terms of underestimation of what it actually takes to do real service. And we learned the hard way.
I'd also say I think looking back on it, we're probably pretty lucky along the way as well. I mean, one, it's nice to have war stories, I guess, because we certainly have those with some of the experiences. But as to why, I know our reasonings might actually be a little bit different. We always kind of cooked, right? Everything from the dorm room bullshit you slept together, having Food Channel on at like 3 a.m, while ordering wings. But I don't know. We like posted. This is back in the Facebook days, and everyone's commenting, "Oh, you guys should totally open a restaurant. This looks so good." But it was just like something fun.
Lots of ego fodder.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And then I think from a business standpoint, I thought we'd be successful doing something different.
Right.
I think especially campus at Lake Yukon, when we went, you had a Chinese restaurant, a Japanese restaurant, a wings place, 2 wings places, pizza, and dive bars, right? So we're like, hey, we're Asian, we're pretty involved in the community there. So we thought we could try to bring like a new energy, something different.
A little bit more options and diversity to the campus.
Yeah.
Right, so
and for people who don't know, your first attempt was it sushi right off the bat, or what?
So it was called Haruaki Cafe. I believe we can actually use that term now because we were sued right out the
Really?
gate.
C&D.
We got C&D'd.
Yeah.
Really?
So
By what? By why?
So I guess if we get into it, it doesn't exist anymore. So
Yeah.
I think we can talk about it. But Haru Sushi was a sushi chain that was acquired by Benihana Corporation.
Oh.
And then the way trademarks work, and I'm sure you've seen the news with David Chang and Momofuku with the chili crisp right now, is if you purchase an asset and you own a trademark, you have to vigilantly defend it, otherwise you lose the right to it, even if that means being a bully and kind of going after everyone. So we discovered they sent C&Ds out to like 50 different any Haru associated words.
Just anything that starts with Haru?
Haru, right.
Crazy.
So
and even if you're not sushi or?
Yeah, it didn't matter as long as you were like
food.
restaurant and food.
Oh, yeah, okay.
So we called it Haruaki Cafe because we're on a college campus. Haru means spring and Aki means fall in Japanese. And so it was kind of like a comfort food restaurant.
Food
so,
fusion.
you know, we had like beef bowls and curry don and sushi rolls and things of that nature, but kind of more homey, kind of like you know, comfort food, if you will. So, but yeah, we just kind of and we introduced bubble tea. It's interesting. We've had great stories.
First bubble tea on campus.
First bubble tea on campus. First bubble tea of many lives. I'd say. I would be. You know, the way we had it, the way we had it set up was like the sushi bar is kind of out in the public. So I'm talking to so many guests and overhearing a lot of things. And so, you know, we'd overhear all the time, like, oh my God, Becky, you need to try this drink. I don't know why they put fish eggs in it, but it's freaking amazing.
Wow.
And so it like became a thing.
That's so crazy.
You know, we did like okonomiyaki and you have like the dancing bonito, right? Because of the heat. But then people would be like, yeah, it's like live squid. It like,
that's
you know,
so
like
funny,
moves around.
dude.
So people are all like, it's so
today,
exotic and so different. I mean, now that type of food is everywhere, which is cool.
Right.
We have access. But back then it was pretty new. And I think for us, it's kind of fun bringing something new and bringing an educational piece. And everyone was pretty supportive. Like we were kind of surprised. Sure, we had probably the other end of the spectrum with Karen's kind of going like, oh my God, I spent 3 months in Osaka. This is not how they did it in that shop. Right. But on the other side, a lot of kids are really open-minded.
Right.
It was like foreign. It was like, I've never seen this. It's kind of weird, but my friends are saying it's awesome. So I got to come and try it. And I think at that point of our lives, we were only a couple of years removed. So we had deep connections to the university still. So the school was supportive. We knew like professors and organizers, and they would always give us opportunities to do catering and kind of support us in that manner. So in that essence, you know, and like our day one staff was just patient and just understanding. And we joke about it. There's so many things that went on between like 2013 and 2016 we look back at now and be like, oh my God, we were serving people? Like, what the hell were we doing? Dude. Like, but it was a really fun time, you know, 100-hour work weeks and a lot of learning, I'd say. But
so why so many hours? Like at that time, was it just you guys and like maybe a couple other people? Like, why were you?
Yeah, a lot of it was just a combination of arrogance and ignorance. I think we went into it with no family background in any kind of restaurant or support.
And what about personal experience, like prior to that?
None. Well, actually, no, that's a lie. I do have 2 experiences. My first 2 jobs, I lasted 3 hours at a Chinese restaurant each, and I got fired and let go. So that's my like. If I write a book in the future, that's my opening remark.
Got to the 100-hour work weeks.
Yeah. So I think with experience-wise, honestly, we did have a friend, and his father gave us a crash course. He, on the other hand, had opened like 10, 12, 14 restaurants. I don't know. The man's a legend.
I feel like he's opened like at least 20.
Something
crazy. He had 8 in New York at one point.
Holy shit.
Right. But he's just this like super old school, broken English. We call him he's kind of a gangster. And all these stories, everything from getting arrested to just all the crazy wild stuff. He gave us 2 crash courses, basically 3 hours each of...
Just sat you down.
Just literally walked us through his restaurant. Was like, this is how you do sushi rice. This is how you do this. This is how you do that. Practice, practice, practice. And we're like, okay, I guess we'll practice.
Right.
So from there, we just tried to do everything from scratch. So in an essence, it's ironic because I think nowadays so much food is not from scratch and it feels the same, right? It's like out of a box or frozen. But we started doing everything from scratch because we didn't know that distributors sold this pre-made or this or that. So we were making.
We were also like a pretty relatively small community. Like Yukon's in the middle of like bumblefuck nowhere. And like getting distributors out there, like big distributors or distributors with like a lot of variety, especially Asian fare, wasn't quite common. So we actually had to go and pick up a lot of the ingredients ourselves.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I
so
literally,
it's a combination of that.
I like negotiated with the owner of a grocery store. I'd be like, listen, if I come back every week and I order this much, can you set it aside for me? And, and that was like a 45-minute drive one way. So that would mean 9 a.m., go drop her off, and then I'm going to drive for 2 hours to pick up everything.
It's like to the nearest like large city.
Hartford, Connecticut.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
Even then, it's not that large.
I love how you you're gonna say you don't think Hartford's large. We don't think Hartford's large.
It's the largest city in
Connecticut.
Yeah. But yeah, and then come back, and the thing is never organized. Couldn't predict anything, so probably went like 4 or 5 times a week. Hella inefficient.
Wow.
But I think for us, it was just like young energy, survival mode, and kind of addressing the problem in front of us.
Yeah.
But
what we didn't solve with like being smarter was being solved with work harder.
For sure.
And that's the main reason why, like the 100-hour work weeks.
I think it seems very old school. Like I think a lot of the older kind of our parents' generation mom and pop restaurants were that way as well.
Yeah.
So maybe I don't know if the mentor that you had was basically like almost encouraging you to do something like that, but I'm sure that's sort of like how he started as well, right? Like,
yeah. So. I mean, I know he made his. I mean, this is kind of why we did it too the way we did. Is he made his own sushi vinegar for sushi rice, from scratch, and that's how we started building ours. And honestly, the level of what we did is like, I think we were underpricing ourselves for like how intensive and how artisanal of what we did was, right? Because literally everything was made from scratch.
Yeah.
Like our own recipes, and they were all like a labor of love.
Right.
So kind of crazy to think. But yes.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so that was Haruaki. From there, how did you end up in Boston? And then what was your sort of, let's skip time through a little bit. So right now, it's not just one restaurant. You're owning and operating many, also doing the advisory consulting thing. You're involved with that too as well, right? Yeah. So like, can you explain sort of where you're at now? And then we'll step back into how you got there.
I'll let you take this one.
Yeah. So we have concepts and projects all the time, but we like to measure it by brick and mortars. So our newest brick and mortar is our 11th one that we're opening. However, we didn't go the like opening the same brand over and over route. So most of our concepts are new every single time, which in retrospect is kind of silly. It's a lot of extra work, but I think for us, it was wanting to continue that creativity aspect of things, wanting to see where we could push the envelope a little bit, maybe new concepts that the city hasn't seen, and or another twist on something that's classic, but we can kind of put our own stamp on it. So, but with that being said, we're not really in the grind as much. I think there's selective days where we'll find ourselves kind of in the mud per se, if you will. But we've got an amazing team. We've got partners. Every concept and location set up a little bit differently. There's different investors. There's like owner operators. So we treat each project as its own. So we basically build a team, and every dynamic is a little bit different for each project. And with that being said, we also have kind of a core advisory team that also kind of works very fluidly to fill in the gaps, and we all kind of lean on each other a lot to figure out where the needs, and we'll meet and go, okay, where are we now? What's the next 90 days look like? Or something, if a general manager suddenly walks away from one project, we get back together and go, okay, throw everything out the window from last week. We got to reschedule everything coming up now with this person gone. So we kind of move as this like, a lot of support, but it's this fluid kind of machine, if you will, to fill in the gaps and continue kind of providing that service. So
fascinating. To give people a scope of the diversity of all the different types of projects you're involved with. Can you just list some of the names and the, I guess, concept behind some of them?
Yeah. So,
want to do some of the old ones or the ones that are even closed to?
Yeah, do a good mix. Some of the OGs, some of the ones people will definitely know, some of the people may not know.
So, I mean, we have the original OG Haraki, which is no longer, you know, Love Art Sushi brand. We did Love Art Udon for a bit too. That unfortunately closed during COVID. Sursday, which is closed now as well. Cambodian sandwiches.
Yeah.
Cambodians, hey.
Shout out to the Cambodians.
Yeah, shout out to the Cambodians.
Poke by Love Art is a little bit of a spin-off of Love Art, but it's I still think it's one of the few 100% gluten-free Asian restaurants.
Right.
Wow.
We go out of our way to source tamari.
Go check it out. He's super gluten intolerant.
Oh, yeah. Hey. It's like we go out of our way. Like it's funny because it shares, it's like poke, which is very similar to Love Art Sushi. And the menu at first glance looks really different, but even the sourcing from the seaweed salad to the soy sauce, everything, completely different operations because we go out of our way to get gluten-free.
Yeah, and what we can't get gluten-free, we make it from scratch.
Correct. So. Yeah. So like for eel sauce is like everywhere, right? Everyone just buys it, but we make it from scratch because we can't find the gluten-free one. So, you know, with that, even though the concept and cuisine might be the same, our approach to it was we wanted to kind of do something different and accommodate that community as well. So, and then we've got, we've launched pop-ups from, you know, Nani Chicken Buns was a really fun project. That was just coincidentally when that whole fried chicken thing was such a hype. We had been doing pop-ups at breweries and just like fun projects. And then Cloud and Spirits is just completely different. I think Cloud and Spirits, I mean, it's closed now for only private events. So it's more nightlife-y. But when we were operating, I think that was my kind of, hey, so just to back up a little bit, I think we still operate with, I know I do, with a lot of imposter syndrome. I think in the space that we work, especially a project like Love Art, and if you look at a lot of our restaurants, they come across as fast casual. And there's always this kind of stigma of, yes, there are some fast casuals that are completely numbers driven, and the culinary aspect is second fiddle, right? And so, I don't know, I've always kind of had a chip on my shoulder. So when Cloud and Spirits, kind of the original plan fell apart with Cloud and Spirits, I kind of stepped in and worked. To be honest, Michael is really the main owner there. We're kind of the investor and supporter, but I was given a chance to kind of step in and run a menu. So that was my like more elevated dining kind of menu where you know, a lot of cooking that I like to do isn't necessarily Asian. It's a lot of French and Italian techniques. I know we have this debate all the time, like favorite cuisine in the world. Mine is actually French.
Really?
That is my number one.
Yeah.
I think yours is still what, Korean or Japanese?
Wow.
Honestly, I don't know. Top 3: French, Korean, and Japanese.
Yeah, for me, it's French, Japanese, and Italian. So, but with that being said, I got to have fun there. I got to flex some culinary wings that, you know, it's not as translatable in a fast casual, right? I think for me, it was like trying to prove to myself, maybe I do belong in the industry, and I'm not here just buying stuff, repackaging it, and taking a cut in between. So
I think we do more than that, but I mean, to be fair, you know, our fast casuals are logistified. We get to have fun when we first open them. We create these menus, but they are meant to serve people in, you know, for lunch rushes, and they are meant to be fast. In that regard, to be able to serve a specific type of demographic, but they are logistified, and I think at this point, you know, Cloud Spirits was a little bit of an homage or a comeback to the origins of what we used to do, which was play with our food, you know, have fun with designing it, and not be stuck to a singular menu that, you know, we have to keep for perpetuity.
Right. I was a huge fan of Cloud when y'all first opened, and I had multiple birthday dinners there.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So I was sad to see it go, but I think it's a good maybe segue into a conversation about things not working out sometimes. So you mentioned Love Art, Udon, Cloud. Like these are, you know, people talk about failures being a big learning experience. Like obviously every time is different as well, but like, are there any lessons that you took out of those two that you said, oh, maybe if I could do this again differently, it might have been a different outcome? Well, I guess, you know,
anything.
Right.
No, I mean, I think I think you try to go into these ventures, as educated as possible. But a lot of it is still like speculation. It's like, does this food make sense at this location? What's my demographic? You try to calculate your numbers in terms of like, okay, my margins, what can I sell this for? Realistically, what can we make? And, how do I make the ends meet, right? What sort of staffing I need for what type of establishment. And I think the problem with udon was, I think people loved what we had. I think it was a combination of udon's a really heavy dish, and it's not something you can come back to that often. And what we had created was a model that was closer to fast casual. We were emulating the marugames and the other fast casual and high turnover udon places, but it wasn't necessarily catching on the way it did over there. And we weren't necessarily seeing like the everyday person come back continually, even though that's kind of what we were hoping for. And so it was the wrong model with the wrong type of food in the wrong place, a combination of all three that culminated in what I think happened to udon. I mean, we had a great team. Everyone was, putting out good product. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think it just didn't pan out because it just wasn't the right fit, even though you do all that research ahead of time.
Yeah.
And as entrepreneurs, you think, okay, well, how do I fix this? What do I do? You swap up, your operations, you change out, the way you serve people. Am I gonna swap this over from, counter service over to more like maybe a little bit more actual fast casual where people will seat themselves and you bring them over to them, create a little bit more of a dine-in environment or halfway in between. And I just, nothing quite stuck. So that was udon.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know for me, and again, I guess just to clarify, we have very different roles within our organization as well. So we're almost like polar opposites in that.
Oh yeah, we actually work terrible together.
Interesting.
Awful,
okay, let's talk about that a little bit. So what are each of your roles, and like why do you say you work terrible together?
To elaborate a little bit more, we don't work well side by side. I think we're yin and yang, yin and yang. So like, what one is good at, the other is good. But one is good at, the other's bad at, and what vice versa.
Yeah,
right?
I know exactly.
So. But because of that, we also butt heads because we have different priorities. I'm more operational based. I'm very micro-minded in terms of like I break down a task into like micro parts, and it makes it digestible for me and for the people that I train. I'm a little bit more hands-on. Ron is very big picture. He's the visionary of the team, and he navigates the ship. But like the way we work is also like it's just. No.
Yeah, I feel like you've gotten better at understanding the language of what happens up here. Yeah, I'm kind of in my own world a lot of times. And like I don't realize sometimes my mind's running 100 miles an hour, but my mouth is moving at like 50. So half the stuff that I think I said out loud, it was completely lost and never communicated. And I think.
No. Sorry, I'm gonna cut you off. Like, there is a lot that goes in your head, or goes on in your head, and like, there's only so many words that can come out of your mouth to encompass that, and there's only so much time. And so I think, I mean, to be fair, it is like, I think you're the driving force of the team. Praise. You're the driving force of the team, but I think it's. When they say, I don't want to call you genius because that's too much, but they people, not quite, but they
this
operate in their own wavelength.
I like this.
Yeah. So you can tell which of the three, earlier statements from the beginning.
Yeah.
You are, right? But they operate in their own wavelength, and I think the biggest thing is that to the success that I don't necessarily success. Yeah. So now you know which one we feel about the other three.
Right.
I think we are where we are is because of that, but it also has forced us to anticipate what goes on in there without you actually having to say anything.
Yeah, I mean, I'm like the hurricane that kind of blows through and kind of cleanup crew that keeps everything actually working, right? So, she talked about steering the ship, but I might be steering the ship, but she's kind of the engine and like everything, whenever we've got breaches in the hull, she's literally there fixing it. And what I mean by that is grease trap backups, and it's really gross. And she's literally like, let's go, throws on her garbage bag, makeshift suit, and just gets down and dirty. And
that's wild.
I'm kind of on the other side, right? I'm a bit more, there's times where I feel like I'm a bit more ivory tower-ish, where, and there's pluses and minuses. I think sometimes I could stand to be more present, but then other times if I do that, I kind of get overwhelmed and we start losing direction. And I think it's just balancing the scale and kind of figuring out where to fill in the gaps. And of course, it's not just us two; it's the entire team around us. They've kind of, I think we've been really lucky where a lot of our core team has been with us for so long, and a lot of that is a tribute to really everyone kind of understanding each other's kind of like quirks and weaknesses, and to be honest, a lot of patience. I think as with, I don't like the word family. I think that's one thing that I don't like to call my team, because family almost has this insinuation like you're stuck with someone.
And you can't.
There's like you owe someone something.
You can't have sex with them. You can't marry.
Right. But I think for us, everyone has a very healthy pots of relationship where you can be a friend, you can be a coworker, and separate the two when necessary. And I think we've, it took a long time, but I think both ourselves personally, between us two, and within our team, I think we're in a really healthy place now. I do think about, and so many amazing people work for us, and I do feel bad sometimes, because I'm like, I could have been a better leader. I could have been a better mentor, a better superior, better friend. And but these are kind of things that, as much as I can try to say that and reach back out, it's like, well, it doesn't undo what 2016 was like, what 2018 was like, etc. So
let's talk a little bit about relationships, partnerships, team.
This is mood lighting.
Wow. Give it some like bisexual lighting.
But I'm down though. All right, let's do a quick shot. All right, what language are we doing? Do you know? We did Korean last time. Do you know what Cambodian she is?
I actually don't know Cambodian.
Okay.
Because I grew up a good little Cambodian. And so we don't.
Yeah, none of that demon stuff.
None of that.
What's exactly.
I know French. I know Japanese.
Yeah, let's do French.
French. Salut.
Salut. All right, Andy. Salut.
Salut.
But the thing about French. Remind us to go back onto the French again later. But we're going to talk a little bit more about business and stuff first.
You parlez français?
No, he just doesn't like him. He doesn't like him.
Okay.
So
never mind.
The French that colonize both Vietnam and Cambodia.
Exactly. So I'm always low key salty about the French, but they gave us a lot, banh mi. There's also a theory that pho is actually based on a French dish. So I mean, at that point, if that's true, like they pretty much
everything. They did pate too.
Exactly. So I mean, I love them, and Hennessy. That's why that's there.
True.
But so relationships, partnerships, team. Let's start first about the personal, right? So you guys are you married now, right?
Yes.
So like. How crazy is that? Like, people say never go into business with your loved one. Like,
we did
everything
you could do wrong. We did wrong.
Why'd you do it?
Because we were dumb. Yeah. No. Yeah.
So would you have not?
If I could do it all over again, probably. Like if I went back to the beginning, I probably would have made some different choices.
Would you, if there was like a second Ron who was like the same Ron as Ron, but like business, like he could do the same thing at work, and then you could keep your Ron at home? Would you separate the two, or do you prefer?
No. Okay. I think we've come a long way. I mean, I'm grateful for where we are, because I mean, I love him, and and cute on track.
Foreplay in action, live foreplay.
And I think we've come a long way, like especially in our partnership because of work. I think, you know, the understanding that we have of each other is like super in depth. And you know, like I mean, like he is my best friend, especially now. But you know, I wouldn't trade him for anything because like the understanding that we have each other, the innate just cohesion, cooperation, and then the syncness that we have is just irreplaceable, insane, invaluable.
Yeah, I honestly, if we look back on it, I'll let you win this one. I was probably a piece of shit.
Yeah, you were. I wouldn't go back to OG Ron.
She wasn't. I think she's
yeah.
been
always
pretty,
wholesome,
pretty
Cambodian.
wholesome and stable
Yeah.
and awesome. And I think a lot of that just was like hard lessons learned.
Yeah.
I know, you know, I don't know how many people knew. I'm sure a handful of our like close friends did, but we had a pretty tough time. I think like for several years.
It definitely did. It put a strain on our relationship.
Really, yeah.
It was pretty bad. I think in terms of like, you know, working with someone, you know, 100-hour work weeks.
Yeah.
Seeing them and not having that be able to separation, not having that separation when you go home either.
Yeah.
And so you take, and you know, when we were starting off, we had to take work home,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so having to take that home too, and not being able to separate that was like such a stressful situation. I will say though, like, you know, I was probably the more balanced of us, but I won't take for granted, you know, the way you've made me grow as well. I think that, you know, I was more calm, I was more collected, but I also was a little bit more naive than you were. And I think, you know, I grew in that sense.
She also got better at talking to people. Charismatic now.
Oh yeah,
great stories.
I was terrible.
Really?
Yeah, this is not OG Jess.
Okay, see, that's growth. I love that. Well, so what? I mean, I don't know if you want to get into if it's painful to get into the stuff that went wrong. Like, what tips would you have for someone who might be thinking about going into business with a partner? What to avoid? What were some things that, was it the fact that you're always together? Is it the fact that
just don't do it.
Yeah.
But if you do, I think having patience, you know, and putting things into perspective. I think, you know, in the light of the situation, I thought what I was doing, I can think about like one situation, right, where specifically, this is like when we first opened. So these were just dumb conversations. And, you know, at that point, I just got a dishwasher. But we had these bowls, right? There's these melamine bowls. This is my very first store, by the way. So these are dumb mistakes, right?
Yeah.
We had these melamine bowls we used for service. And I didn't want to open a new pack of them to like have too much to have to wash because I don't know, having more dishes to wash, even though you could just turn around the same set, made sense. And then Ron's like, why don't you, and we were like, in this is the middle of a rush, we're dying. He's like, just open the fucking new pack, and then that way you don't have to wash them all. But I'm like, I'm gonna have to wash them all at the end of the day. We like literally just had a scream match in the kitchen in front of our staff because of this, because you know, I didn't want to listen to him and he thought he knew better than me. Granted, it's perspective and what makes sense, but you know, at the end of the day, that wasn't really worth fighting over.
Yeah. It also seems like one of those fights where it might not have happened if you weren't also
stressed,
personally related or you know, in a relationship as well, because like in a regular work environment, you might not snap over something like that, but
and there's not much of a hierarchy when you're there with your personal, you know, significant other. You know, when you have a clear hierarchy in terms of, okay, this person's in charge of this, or at least this section of the business, right? Like this is my kitchen manager. There's a little bit more clear-cut roles in terms of responsibilities and going and saying, okay, this may not have been the way you want to do it, but this is my domain. This is my responsibility. And I'll take ownership over this after the fact, right? But this is my decision. This is kind of where your jurisdiction stops. We didn't really have that either. You know, having roles that we could respect with each other, because he would flip to the kitchen, he could flip to the front, you know, and vice versa, depending on the day. But, you know, there was just not a lot of structure. And I think we took that for granted. And that's kind of maybe if I had to give, you know, a new person who's looking to get into the role or into the business, some advice, it's like, you know, creating boundaries, creating structure, creating, you know, guides, and like at least like baseline stuff to kind of give yourself some rules of thumb to live by, you know. we didn't really quite have that with our first store.
Yeah, I'd say biggest piece of advice is just ask people. Like, use your friends' networks, like
resources.
I think and maybe this is a result of just growing up Asian and kind of like, you know, I grew up, you don't ask for help. Like, figure it out and stop complaining.
That's
stop
the gaze.
So from a ego standpoint, I think it was like, no, I'm gonna figure it out myself. Like, I'm gonna make a decision. It could be so dumb, and it was dumb many times. But
Were
now,
you the type to raise your hand in class? To ask questions?
Absolutely not. I was the type to hope I never got picked on.
Right.
I didn't want attention. You know, attention could mean failure, right? So I had a lot of kind of like confidence issues kind of growing up. So I think with that being said, it was all pride and ego at the end of the day, and it was like not letting go of that. And I think, and I don't know, maybe it was a result of just how things were back then. I think, to be honest, I like the progression. I think where the industry's gone, I think people are willing to share more. I think the advent of social media, people are able to share more, get more access to information. And I think that's one thing you don't want to undervalue.
Right.
And I think a lot of people, and I know a lot of people are better about this, but there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help. They, you know, for us, it's people come all the time and I'm like, you know, they're like, why are you telling me this? Why, like, I could just open up and be a competition. I'm like, I'd rather you be successful, and you know, like, competition is good because that's where creativity comes from. That's where awesome things happen, and that's how you represent a community. What sucks is if you get wrapped up dealing with some bullshit because of some like legal issue or something that a little bit of advice.
Yeah, things you didn't have to learn the hard way. If you you know, just ask.
Wow. Yeah. So what? Yep. So when it comes to like building a team for, you know, the Blackfin Blackfin Collective, right?
Yeah.
That's named after the orca.
Technically, blackfin is a species of tuna, but it's the smallest one. So you have your like bluefin, yellowfin, and because we're kind of small, kind of not mom and pop anymore, we thought blackfin was kind of appropriate.
Yeah, that's cute.
Especially since we work with fish a lot.
Yeah. But okay, so when you're building out a team, either for that or for just any new like project or something like that, it seems like, especially the way that you're doing it, where everything's different every time, and you mentioned maybe it's not the most efficient or the most, you're not taking advantage of maybe some of the economies of scale that you might be able to do, right? It seems like you would need a massive network, a lot of people to say, hey, take care of this, take care of this. How do you meet people to bring in, and how do you vet them, and how do you keep them? Good people when you find them.
Start with personal references first.
Yeah.
Like team and people are such an integral part of what you do. What really makes or break a store for us is people. You know, what we do is we invest in people. We spend time with people. You know, the food comes second. You know, yeah, we sell food, but there is no food without, you know, your team. So I think the most success we had was when we reached out through our personal network, you know, that sort of rapport, that sort of understanding of, you know, who you are and who they are as a person, or at least through someone else that you respect, goes a really long way. And then otherwise you go through like the general hiring process, you know, the Indeeds, the ZipRecruiters, you know.
Yeah, and I think we're still trying to figure that out. And we get lucky a lot.
Yeah.
You know, we build relationships. I mean, when we look back on, and again, I touched upon it earlier, there's a lot of people that were introduced by friends of friends or siblings and others that I, to this day, feel like I didn't do a good job, like building a relationship in terms of being a mentor. But I think the biggest thing is, for us personally, we just want to present our most organic and real self, and you hope that you kind of attract people that kind of have similar thought processes, and I think listening, I think that's the biggest thing. That's probably the biggest lesson. If there's any overarching lesson, it's kind of understanding that people's perspectives and what they're looking for change all the time. I think it's really arrogant for you to go, oh, I want to do this vision and I'm giving a paycheck, so you should support my vision. I don't think that's the right way to build a team. I think you should build a team by understanding what are the motivations of someone, and also knowing that, hey, they might have told you something 2020 and that might have been true, but we always check in with our people. Hey, like things change, right? You get into relationships, you get married, you do family planning, you, God forbid, health, all of these things can change all the time. So I think it's never taken for granted who you have. And even if you have a good thing going, as with anything in life, maintenance is required. And a lot of that is interpersonal maintenance. That's having conversations that isn't just about, hey, did you get that report done or that order in, but it's, really seeing where someone is, and kind of getting to a wavelength where you can kind of tell if something's off, and then you can figure out how to talk to someone in a specific way, and getting really personal in that essence. Not prying, but understanding who your team is and how they react to certain kind of ways of interaction. So some of it is a little bit of code switching with understanding who it is you're talking to, and a lot of it is just kind of checking in and just seeing where somebody is.
I think that's like a universal lesson in sort of like management and leadership in general too, whether it's hospitality or not. It's like listening, empathy, and adaptability. It's like what you're saying right now, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we're gonna switch gears a little bit from the business side into more how'd you call this segment? Racism, but
preference, not racism.
But,
racism.
Yeah, this is we're gonna talk about some stuff, but before we switch off of all this, if you told me a story yesterday that I thought was really fun, which was the origin of the Poke Bowl.
Yeah.
If you could tell that'd be awesome. Yeah.
So I'll shout out my buddy Kenton and Shamar, if you guys are listening. So again, our Padalaki, the way it was set up was like you walked in the door, the register was like to my right, and then my sushi station is right there. So everyone that's coming in, I'm working but saying hi and having conversations. So story goes, I don't know what, we were maybe like 2 months into opening, so we were in the weeds, right? Probably finally got our feet under us, but Friday nights, like I said, the Yukon community was freaking awesome. They came out and supported, so like lines out the door.
Go Huskies!
Oh yeah. Wait, is it today's the
championship? So
Yukon.
we're gonna take it all.
Oh yeah.
But so the way it works, people are walking by me, and I friends are coming in. So a couple of my buddies, they're like 6'5" defensive linemen. Man, we're ready to eat. We're gonna crush so many rolls, and as quote unquote skilled as I think I got, you can only roll so fast and cut so fast, right? Especially when they're ordering like 8 or 9. So got this idea where Kenton's gonna claim he had the idea. I remember it differently, but long story short, as I'm talking to him, we just decided to throw a bunch of shit into a bowl. I just like found something in the back, wasn't on the menu, so I was just like, dude, I'm just gonna hook you up, and just like piled it on, just like sauced the shit out of it. Like poke wasn't even a trendy thing by then, and then suddenly it became like a thing.
We called it the Husky Bowl.
So that was Shamar. Shamar came up with the name, so we called it the Husky Bowl. I'll give him credit for that, and it became a secret menu item that spread initially through the Division I athletes first, because again, we have like burrito places, burger places, but like nothing super healthy that people didn't feel guilty eating every time. So and again, this was during Stewie, Brianna Stewart, 4-time champion. Like the women's team would come all the time. Shabazz Napier came through. Like they all supported like crazy, and they were just ordering this Husky Bowl, and it became a not so secret menu item because everyone was just like, dude, I need this like sushi bowl. It's just like a different way to eat sushi no one's seen before, and that's really how it was born. And it just kind of like took off from there. And we just started. It was like basic stuff. It was like salmon, tuna, shrimp tempura, avocado, right? And then we just like put sauce on it. So obviously nowadays poke bowls get like crazy with all the different options you have. But from there, I played a lot of pickup basketball, and I would like meet just people randomly. I honestly, a lot of our staff and
so much business dealings have been born out of him playing basketball.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean that's how Michael joined the team and took over college for us. So yeah, that's another side note. All my friends are like tall Asian.
Yeah.
Guys, so I have a bunch of single ones out there.
That's a different podcast, guys.
But, yeah, and I met some people like international kind of students, and they're like, hey, we got some money. If we throw you some, would you open more? And I'm like,
take the Husky Bowl worldwide. Is that what they're
pretty
saying?
much, yeah. Just like, and then we basically, and throughout the process with Haruaki, I think for us too, we were always like digging ourselves out of the hole, right? Like we were super busy, but it wasn't efficient. So, any dollar that went right back into trying to increase efficiency. So we, by the second year, our menu looks so different because we cut out a lot of the from scratch stuff. We focused in on what sold. Not surprisingly, it was California rolls and chicken teriyaki. Just still a basic campus back then. But we would lightly renovate. We kept putting our money back in to increase efficiency. And then got to a point where the sushi bowl was getting so popular that, we had these friends that are like, I'll like throw a bunch of money. Can we go into business together? And that's what kind of led into the opening of Love Art Sushi in Boston. Right in Boston. We, no clue what we were doing. We like hired an accountant, and by the way, just because someone has a law degree and or a CPA, that doesn't mean they're great. Like lesson learned too. Like vet you're the professionals
Google
you hire.
Reviews.
Google reviews, talk to friends, referrals are the best. We've unfortunately had some not so great experiences with previous people we paid to provide services and professionals. But regardless, it just kind of snowballed and moved quick, and got to a point where we decided to close Haruaki and go all in on kind of the sushi bowl concept. Because we could still do other things that weren't sushi. We could do like chicken bowls and shrimp bowls and things like that. So that's kind of that story on how we got started. And it was funny because when we launched it, we were opening here, we suddenly found out Pokeworks was opening its first location here. Yeah. There's a Poke City. There were like 4 restaurants, and I don't think anyone knew the other one was opening.
Yeah.
So it was like suddenly you had a city that had no Poke, and in 2016-17 had 4 open at the same time, which actually was great because it just brought so much awareness where I still think if only one opened, that one would not have been successful.
I totally agree with that.
It just was like supportive of one another and brought awareness to the whole kind of segment group. So in that essence, I think we got lucky. We kind of rode a wave that matched with a trend that was happening in the food industry, but for us, it just happened organically. It was
so strange. Yeah.
So it kind of worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great story. Before we get into the meaty stuff here, we want to go back to the French, which is we ask this question sometimes, which is if you were forced to genocide one like
cuisine,
one cuisine, one
The rest of that question took a long time.
Right. Yeah. So one genre. I was trying to pick the word, but yeah, well, basically one country's cuisine. What would it be? And his answer is the French, and that's why when you brought it up earlier, that you.
Pourquoi?
Interesting.
Okay, so I've never liked French food, but I understand that a lot of the cooking techniques and all of that came from France. So I'm more educated now.
You don't enjoy it.
I don't enjoy it. I'm never like, oh, I'm in the mood for French food.
I think. I don't know what French food is. Yeah, but I mean, you love escargot.
I think that's the other problem. Yeah. The one thing I will say, it's unnecessarily expensive.
Yeah, it's not accessible. Yeah,
in America for the most part. So I don't blame you in that essence. I think it really wasn't until my adult life that I kind of appreciated it more. But
what made you start appreciating it though?
I don't know. I mean,
just the culture around it.
Maybe, or it's just like I just kind of like the flavors. It's like I like it's like what foie gras and
very rich,
like escargot and like honestly a lot of more like homey beef tartare, and I don't know, I just kind of like that.
Fair enough.
Food.
I think French food is like highly technical, and I think it can be unsuspecting because we think of it as like just Western food and it's kind of everywhere, but it's also because it's everywhere, it's also kind of hard to place like, oh, this is specifically French or this is French derivative. And so it can get lost, I think, in terms of like the thought process of like food cuisine types, unless you like experience like just a specific French place, because it gets I think, reinvented with lots of other cuisines often. And like, Cloud and Spirits being a good example of that, right?
Oh yeah, I didn't do traditional French food.
Yeah.
But it was like fun, do like a potato dauphinoise, which is like super thin layers of potato, but then I created like a kimchi queso, so it was like instead of just a cream or bechamel.
I think rather than like wowing bold palate wise, it's more of a technique thing. And like the artistry and like the execution, and how texture, how well blended flavors are, combination of. But yeah.
Yeah. I also think it's the one cuisine that utilizes vegetables better than any other cuisine. A lot of like roasts and that, you talk about the Holy Trinity combination of soup stocks and everything, just like subtleness with celery and carrots, stuff that's like kind of boring and it's like, sure, you got wings with celery sticks and carrots, but then I think when you employ French techniques, it really kind of transforms it a little bit. But for me.
Yeah. So kill, fuck, marry food.
Yeah,
it's really hard. I actually never thought about this. This is a good question.
Because the ones that you probably would get rid of are ones that you probably just don't have a lot of. So then you probably just don't think of it. So, I'll give mine so you can have some time to think. So he says French. I would say Indian. And that's even though I like Indian food a lot, right? It's just that if I had to choose one, because I'm such a lover of food, it's hard to pick one to get rid of. But like, that just has to be the one for me, it's not that I don't like it, I still like it.
When you put it that way, probably Mediterranean food for
me.
Oh, yeah. I'm not a big fan of lamb and spiced stuff. I mean, I do like spices, don't get me wrong, spices and everything. Cambodians use spices, but the type of mix, it is good, I like it. And I just think that for me, my palate, the way it works, doesn't find it as pleasurable as like the next thing over.
I agree with you there.
Yeah.
And you're talking more kind of that Eastern Mediterranean region, right? Not so much the Italy, that garlicky Spain.
Yeah, I love garlic.
Right. I feel the same way as you. That's why I clarify. It's just like, when it's like that, like a lot of cumin or whatever, like out there. I'm
not a big fan of cumin.
Yeah.
And I've had like some really great Mediterranean food where I'm like, okay, this isn't the norm. This beats the experience that I've had, and I actually really enjoy this. But more often than not, I'm finding the average experience in terms of like, and it's good quality stuff. It's not like they're not putting good consistent food out in the experiences that I had, but it's just, this isn't necessarily my cup of tea and it's subjective.
Agreed. Yep. That's all the question is,
Yeah.
Just,
Man, this one's hard.
Yeah.
It's like really hard.
You can also choose a food group, I guess, if it's like impossible for you.
Yeah.
Dairy. Meat.
Yeah, I guess like it's ironic because my most favorite dishes that I've ever created is actually German inspired. But I feel like Eastern European is, you got pierogies and meat and potatoes, but it's kind of the same meat and potatoes and kraut all the time. And again, I still think that I created this Jaeger schnitzel dish that's one of my favorite things of all time. But in terms of inspiring and it gets kind of boring after a while.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think that makes sense. I think that's a sensible answer. Like regions with less, I guess, like diversity in either flavors or techniques are probably easier ones to axe. I'd say a lot of the UK area could be kind of lumped in that as well. Like where it's like, again, meats, potatoes, pies, things like that.
Yeah,
I do love those though.
Yeah. Meat potato pies, actually, specifically.
Yeah.
All of them in one thing.
I know. Yeah, I was like, when I was saying that, I was like, that just sounds good. I do like that.
I mean, UK's got, I guess UK's got shepherd's pie and fish and chips, but everything else is kind of
people do like to shit on it. Yeah, exactly.
World,
yeah. But they do have great food out there. We went to London. We had a very semi-homoerotic trip out there, and it was
nice.
We had some great culinary experiences. A lot of great international food. But okay, so continuing the race thing, but not as negative. You guys both grew up in the Northeast for at least a part of your growing up, and you're both Oriental or Chinaman, as they say.
Pretty much.
And so what I guess, and yesterday you when we talked, you mentioned like Asian representation being kind of one of your core things that drives you. What, how much does your being Asian, how much has that impacted you, the way you think, what motivates you throughout your lives?
I think it colors everything. I mean, like, it's hard. I mean, when I was younger, it was really hard to separate the experience from who I was and putting perspective on it because you just didn't know any better.
Right.
But I think, like, the priorities, the functions, and the cultural nuances is ingrained, especially because we do Asian food. And a lot of us are just second geners. Our parents were the first to come over here. And so a lot of those, um, etiquettes, mannerisms, and cultural nuances are transferred over to us, right? And so it's hard to separate it. But I think it's like, I mean, what percentage American are we? Theoretically, that's kind of the conversation where it goes, right? How Americanized or how banana do you feel?
Yep. Or how do other people perceive you?
Right.
Things like that. Yeah.
Man, this one's loaded because Jess and I can talk forever on this.
Yeah.
I think to try to narrow in on a couple things, I think I know I had a tough time kind of growing up. I was originally born in New York, so born in Manhattan. Grew up in Brooklyn, in which I was actually raised mostly by my grandfather. Hence, I'm fluent in Mandarin for that reason, because my parents are still in school. My dad was still finishing up his doctorate. My mom was in nursing school. I mean, it was to a point where, I think I didn't really experience it because I was too young, but I guess we were in poverty while they were, dad was studying for his PhD in the day and delivering Chinese food at night. Mom was a hotel maid overnight and going to nursing school. And I was just like this little kid raised by my grandfather, but I actually didn't really have friends. Went to public school. I think I just had a tough time socializing. And then they finished school and it was a complete 180. We moved from a small apartment in Brooklyn to suddenly suburban Connecticut, rich town, new development. Very suburban, and I guess for lack of a better term, pretty white, I would say.
And in Brooklyn, what was the demographic of the school you were at?
Man, I barely remember. It was very diverse. And I even bounced around a little bit because I would get into gifted programs that, then I had to go to a different PS. So it was I don't even remember the numbers, go from PS 188 to PS 212, and it was all around. But once I kind of got to Connecticut, it was suddenly we lived in a cul-de-sac neighborhood, school buses, and neighborhood kids, right? We ran around, and I think a lot of things that now my parents were forcing me to do, so going to Chinese school, taking piano lessons, etc., weren't the things that the friends that I grew up with did, right? They played baseball, it was sports, their dads were coaches, and I think I had a really tough time because I wanted to belong so badly. And it got to a point where I started blaming a lot of why I thought I wasn't cool or picked on, because I was oh, well, it's because I'm Asian. I associated being Asian, and I think I went through a massive identity crisis for the longest time, and thus also confidence issues. It's funny because I went through states of depression where I went from a straight A student to basically D's and C's, and it was wild because I still forged my report cards, and maybe this is why I'm a decent graphic designer. I literally
That's pretty chill.
The schools use the special paper that's the watermarks and stuff, so I would take a knife and scratch off the ink, align everything, use Microsoft Word 2000 or whatever,
right.
and refeed it, and I just kept feeding fake report cards to my parents until they were hey, we want to enroll you in private school. And literally that interview with the dean of admissions is where everything blew up in my face, because he would talk about, and again, I did the Asian thing, right? So I took the SATs in 7th grade.
Wow.
I was doing all that bullshit and scored well, but I wasn't doing well in school because I was just spending so much time trying to fit in, right? Ignoring whatever. And I still remember it's just man, that was the longest car ride home, because my parents were trying to, the dean, was hey, obviously there's some brightness here. I can see from your standardized test scores and etc. But what's going on. So he like talked to me privately first, and I just kind of like broke down and I like told him everything. I was also going through a period where I was like getting cut by sports teams. I was like making the final rounds and like the first kid cut, basically, not like the team. And just everything summed up. And I just remember like my parents being brought in and the dean talking to them, and they're like, no, like the school messed up. That's why I came late. Like call them again. And I was just like, Dad, stop. Like, here's the truth. But the crazy thing is he still, like, I got in and I transferred schools. I like completely changed the trajectory of my life. And now the second part is, a lot of that is self-inflicted, right? That's just me not being able to work through things. I think having immigrant parents that just don't understand like mental health and identity and things like that. In their mind, it's like, shut up and just like do your job, do what you're supposed to, study, be grateful kind of thing. But from there, you know, it kind of, I was like trying to find my own path. And then now things that are not in my control, which I am going to call out. I have really good friends and we talk about basketball and stuff like that. I do feel like being an Asian face kind of set me back a little bit. They're, you know, Yao Ming was like just getting big and, you know, but it was like, I had a lot of the measurables, right? I was really athletic. I didn't have the confidence. The mentality thing was an issue, just because I always had like imposter syndrome, right? Like I could lift this, I could run this fast, I could jump this high, but I was always kind of told by my parents like, oh, like just focus on your work. Like, why are you, you know, wasting your time? But on the same note, you know, a couple friends of mine and one of my best friends went on to run track at Cambridge University. Great athlete. We both were like cut from the teams, and we just kind of were like, is it really us? Is there a little bit of subtle kind of racism involved? We did grow up in a pretty predominantly, you know, one type of town. I don't know, like that's neither here nor there, but that's all stuff that I've kind of carried a little bit. And even, you know, I think after I got to UConn, that's when, and maybe the year before, I actually met Jess and her friend group, because all my friends were not Asian. I like grew up in Banana Town. Again, it was funny because when I met them, I was this like stuffy prep school kid with an Asian face. Like I was as white as they came. Like literally the quintessential. I had a uniform. I had to wear button down and dress slacks, and you know, I had my Letterman jackets, because by then in private school, I was, you know, junior, senior year, I was on the varsity sports teams and everything. And that's the first time I like had like Asian friends. And this was like Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift just came out, like, you know,
that movie was huge, man.
Dude, and they had friends where like had the suicide doors with the LED lights, and like I started hanging out with them, and it was like Friday nights. Like,
you joined the cool Asians.
I got lucky.
You started dating the cool Asians.
I wasn't the cool Asians.
I was the goody two shoes of the group.
Dude, but I was like at street races at 2 a.m, being like, dude, this is fucking dope. I was like a 17-year-old, obviously, you know, drinking with some friends and all, and like with, you know, it was literally the ABG kind of like import model crowd, and I think that's when.
Wait, where was this?
This was in Hartford, Connecticut.
Really?
It was like underground race scenes.
Yeah, there's like big race car culture there.
Yeah, and it's not necessarily like Asians that run it. It's a heavy
it's
Hispanic
just like
movie.
it's like literally like the Fast and Furious movies, right?
It actually was. So like, you know, there was.
You'd have meetups, cops would
have
come.
meetups. You have the signal of like, yo, 5-0, let's go, and then so everyone meets at the gas stations because they can't really touch you at the gas station. They don't catch you in the act. And, like, it was pretty wild. It was like kind of cool. I was like, oh shit! Like, this is the first time in my life where I was like, being Asian is kind of cool. Yeah, it's cool to be Asian, because I always blamed a lot of my shortcomings and insecurities on being Asian. Again, as an adult, that was my own insecurities, right? It's not because I was Asian, but now this was like, okay, like this is kind of fun. And
well, I mean, like, I don't think it. You know, it's hard to separate like some of the instances that you experience and be able to definitively say whether it was self-confidence or, you know, maybe prejudice, discrimination or racism. Like, and it may not have been even intentional by the other person's part, but you know, I think we've come a long way in terms of acceptance and education, understanding of, you know, different people's cultures. But I don't want you to like shortchange some experiences you had because you just think it was self-confidence.
Yeah, no, I totally. I mean, everything you just said is speaking directly to me too, because I mean, I grew up in the demographics of my hometown is probably very similar to what you're describing. Cul-de-sac, neighbor, like everything, right? Very white. And a lot of my self-confidence issues were I thought it was because I was Asian too, because I'd hear things like, oh, he's cute, like for an Asian, or like, I date her, but she's Asian, or like, like things like that, and it's just like, damn, you just hear this over and over, and you're like, there's something like where Asians are just below, like the status quo in these types of towns, right? And so I think, that it takes an event like getting in. Basically, my next question, which you already got, was when did you feel like it was cool to be Asian? And like when you meet the street
love of
racers,
your life,
right? And then you got AVGs, you got the Sun Kangs, you got everybody, and then you feel like, okay, this is like, and you kind of feel that sense of belonging that you were looking for, but then it's like, oh, this doesn't seem like so much effort anymore, because I'm sure like a lot of things that you were doing was like, the academics probably slipped because you're trying so hard elsewhere to belong with the everybody else, but that's a great story. I mean, for me personally, it was until after college that I felt that, where it was actually when I started working in restaurants, specifically Shabu Zen in Alston, and that's where I met like all these Asians. I'm like, these people are like hilarious. They're so funny. They're cool. Like they're drinking Henny. They're like, tatted up. They're hot. Like everything. I was like, damn, this is like, it feels good to be amongst like these people.
Yeah.
But yeah,
it feels good to be Asian. It
feels great to be Asian. Yeah, and I think that's a big part of, a lack of role models. And I think that's, yesterday you mentioned like the JK people. At that point, pre them, like there was really very little. And then even like during the YouTube phase where it was them and like all the other OG Asians like Tim and all that, it's like that's really all we had for a long time. And even now it's getting better now, but even still like in mainstream culture, it's not like super.
The lack of representation. Like when we were growing up, it was just like kung fu stars.
It was like Jackie Chan,
Jet Li. And then that was basically all that people thought of us. Like,
and then they had white dudes playing Asian dudes in movies. Yeah, that was crazy. Yeah, the karate stereotype. Yeah.
Everyone assumed. Everyone just like, she could probably beat you up because she probably knows karate.
Yeah.
And then you slide with it because you don't want to get in fights with other people, so you let
exactly.
You let
a lot of self-deprecation, I think, was like one of my methods of dealing with that. But yeah, no, I think social media, I think, has helped a lot. Because it's now easy for a lot of Asian people to get themselves out there for other Asian people to see. I think that's something I definitely wish I had when I was like in high school and stuff like that. So, but yeah. Were you like part of the cool Asians like growing up and stuff?
Pardon?
Were you like a cool Asian growing up?
No. So I was like the nerdy little goody two shoes.
But you were in that group.
I was in the group. Yeah. So I mean, to be honest, I was always pretty comfortable with who I was in my ethnicity, and like I was always proud growing up Cambodian. I mean, the town that I grew up in was predominantly white, but my friend group was multicultural. So Peruvian friends, Colombian friends, Japanese, and then Cambodian friends. I actually was really fortunate to have other friends and other people in my school that were of my age range that were Cambodian as well. And so being able to see myself, and specifically even my culture, specifically Cambodians, like if you talk to anyone, like what's Cambodia, right? The fact that I had other Cambodians in my school was such a big help to identity. I was always pretty comfortable and self-assured in who I was, and so being exposed to other people's cultures and the things that they do and how they live was just like, okay, well, this is just the norm for me. So I never had the same troubles, and maybe if anything, I think some of the things that I might have experienced, there are probably some instances, unless it was like blatant overt racism, I probably didn't even realize might have been discriminatory, right? So I think I was on the complete opposite end of the spectrum in terms of experiences.
Yeah. So you're less aware of like the race issue, I guess, than some other people.
Yeah, unless someone was like, "Are you Chinese?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "No, technically I'm half, but."
Oh yeah.
But like what kind of Chinese are you?
Right? A lot of Chinese. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and like I feel like the intent of the question, usually I just gloss over. I gloss over like how a question was phrased growing up, and like you get to the intent of the question. Like, what are you, right? Like I know what you're saying,
right.
you know, but am I necessarily offended? You know, I think that was the norm growing up. So you don't know better.
Yeah.
Right.
That question's tough even now. Like I don't know how to feel about it because I don't personally get offended at all. Like I just, if I answer it, I just want to answer your question. So what's your actual question? You know?
Right.
Like so.
Yeah, I personally feel the same way. I'm personally not offended because I know that they're not necessarily malicious about it, but I do think the educational process of getting people to understand, you know, the power of their words does matter, especially if they apply it in other ways that may be ignorant and or hurtful.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like I went through kind of, you know, once I discovered my like Asian phase, if you will, I kind of went like hardcore on the other side. I would almost kind of bring it upon myself to, and again, I'm lucky, right? Like my friends like I'm built like a linebacker.
Yeah.
I'm tall. My brother's the same height. Like we've never, I think in my like college and adult life, I've never really been made to feel emasculated. But then on the same token, I think I took it too seriously sometimes because then in college I also got really, really involved in a lot of leadership roles, specifically with the Asian American community. But then I found myself, and actually it summed up in this one trip to Martha's Vineyard with my family, and my brother was there. And, you know, I get the question, some old guy was like, hey, just like, I don't know why, we were just walking. It was like a busy street. And he just like jumps in front. I was like, hey, where you from? Where you from? And I'm like, I'm from Brooklyn. Like, you know, can you, like, I'm like trying to stay calm, but I knew where he was getting at. And I was like, no, like, stop with that bullshit. You know really what I meant. Where you really from? And I'm like, no, I don't know. Like, I started getting, like, raising my voice and getting in front. My brother had to jump in. I was like, dude, come on. Like, we're with mom and dad. Like, you know, like, stop. Like,
fight like senior citizens.
Right. Literally, I was old too. But, like, I had a phase where I would get hyper defensive because I'm like, trying to break the model minority thing, right? Like, oh, Asians are always quiet. You know, if I don't speak up and step up, like this could happen to someone else and it could be more dangerous. Or so I kind of lived for a while where I felt the need to go and seek out fights to kind of like prove to one people at a time that no, we're not this way. You can't see us this way. So I had to work through that for a little bit. So, you know, that's where I feel like I was just like all over the map on kind of that Asian pride issue as well. I
went through a very similar thing too, where like once I same thing, I got to the pride in it being Asian, and I wanted to, exactly what you said, break the model minority kind of myth, but I'm not a good fighter, nor am I like aggressive or built like one. So my strategy was to just like basically fuck as many non-Asian women as possible for a little while, and that was like the thing. And then it's like swinging the wrong way, like too far, right? Because then you go back and then you're like, just being centered is good, right? Then, but I don't know, like I feel like I almost needed that in a way, like phase to get something out. But I don't know. I
wonder if the experience is different because, I mean, not to say that not every experience is the same, but I wonder if like being male and Asian also, and I'm sure it does, kind of create a different experience even for you guys.
I think because there's that thing you said, which is the emasculation piece, which is so. And we were talking with a previous guest too that they did a dating app, ran their data and was like, you know, Asian men and Black women are the two, like, you know, you might have heard that. And so I think like that kind of stuck with me, and I was like, oh, like Asian men can be, you know, attractive too. And then you went the Asian men can be like physically dominating too, and so
having to prove something.
Definitely.
It is funny because we joke about it all the time, but like I would get hit on in public by Black women at UConn. You know, so friends always made it a point to make it a point, but and then but then, you know, on the flip side, because the counter report was saying like Asian females were one of the most desired, but then you have the problems with fetishizing and all that.
You ever deal with any of that?
Occasionally, not
because you didn't grow up around like a lot of white people, right? Like it was more diverse.
It is more diverse. I mean, technically we went to the same school in the same town.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But he went to private school.
Oh, right.
But I mean, like, my friend group was my diverse, but I mean, it was predominantly white.
Okay.
did I get hit on a lot? Not necessarily in school, but
Yeah.
I would say like out in the street, probably. You know,
Mhm.
people just walk up to you and like they don't even see your face; they just tap you on the shoulder and they're like, "Can I get your number?"
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
Just see your hair and
Yeah,
yeah,
right. Yeah, like
yeah.
you know, the I think the scariest or like the most alarming one was I was actually at my mom's gas station and I was doing work for her that day. I was like, you know how parents bring their kids to work
Mm-hmm.
every day.
Free
Bring your
labor.
kid to work
Free
every
labor,
day.
yeah. Bring your kid.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was me. And I was like wiping down the cooler windows. So she had me like Windex them, and then I was bringing back like all the materials to the backstock room, and I didn't realize, but this guy followed me all the way back there, and I put it away on a shelf, and this is closed door that's like around the corner of the store, so it's kind of closed off. And then I turn around, there's this guy, and I'm
jacking off.
Yeah, no. No, I think I was so young back then. I probably wouldn't have known what to do, but no, that'd be terrifying.
Yeah.
Even worse. But I was cornered in the stock room. This guy like in the entryway and just being like, and I just turned around. He's like, "Your eyes are so beautiful. Can I get your number?" And I was like, "You didn't even see my eyes."
That's such a good angle.
Yeah. And that was terrifying. I was like, I was shocked, and I was like, "No, can I help you with something?"
That's insane.
Yeah.
You were so. How old were you at the time?
I think like 15, 16.
Sickos, man.
Yeah.
When you were younger, like not, I guess maybe not like when you were of legal age, but still kind of young and naive in a dating sense. Were you ever victimized by a yellow fever haver? Where you thought it was like, oh, you're a nice guy, and then he just turns out to just fetishize.
So I've been with this guy since I was pretty much since I turned 17, pretty much 16, 17. Beautiful. So unless he has yellow fever, he might maybe, but yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. How do you react when people say he has nicer hair than you? Because people say that.
I'm not offended. Actually, my hair is usually shorter.
This is the longest your hair's been. I feel like.
Yeah, it's usually bob cuts and pixie cuts for me. Yeah. I've just been lazy, so I expect him to have better hair.
That's fair.
If anything, I wish he would take care of it even better.
Really?
Yeah.
I've upgraded. I've got my Dyson and my hair.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Damn.
I'm like evolving. I'm evolving.
Yeah.
Have you always had long hair?
No.
Well, not always, but like for most of you.
2013.
13. That's pretty long.
Not 13.
Really?
When did I start growing out? I think like
Love Art Sushi, 16, 17?
16-ish.
Okay.
But then I cut it. I started cutting it, but then COVID, I let it grow out again.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then I cut it short for the wedding.
Oh.
Midline. And now
That's
it's growing
still
back up.
long.
Yeah.
That's still long.
That was like down to here. It was like the shortest I had it for 5 years.
That's like that's girl short hair.
Yeah.
When girls cut our hair, like
right.
Yeah.
It's fresh though. You definitely are. I think probably one of the top, maybe 25 to 28 freshest people I've seen.
Okay.
In
Only
Boston.
28.
Yeah. top 2 foreign Asian. I'll say that.
Okay.
There you go.
I'll take that.
But okay, we'll wrap up with this. It's an easy question, and one that we ask all our guests, which is, what are your hopes for Boston, and specifically around the food scene? But if there's others, you can go as well. But
Me?
Yeah. I'm bad with like big picture questions.
Honestly, and maybe this is more of a bigger political thing, but just more access. I feel like Boston it's a city with a ton of creativity, a ton of diversity, yet it's like wrapped up and it can't get out right now. There's a lot of progressive thinking, a lot of education, but the red tape is insane. It's so hard to do business in the city. Resources are getting better. I think the city's trying to find ways to get better, but real estate's out of control, like cost of living's out of control. And what happens is a lot of people that can offer something tremendous to make the city more vibrant, more creative, more diverse, they're stifled right now because you can't pay the bills, and you can't pay the bills, you can't kind of express yourself. So, the hope, I think, is finding, and there are programs, they're getting better. There's, different grants and programming, and I think access to resources that the city's trying to activate, but a continual push in making that more accessible, making it more small business friendly, and then hopefully encouraging people to actually do that, because I think there's a lot of fear, and I know so many super talented kind of chefs and people running their pop-ups, but they can't get full in yet. The risk is just way too high, right? As opposed to other cities that may be a little bit more accessible in terms of like taking the plunge. I think we're on the right track. I just think that at the same time, we got to fix like the affordable housing and kind of real estate kind of issues.
I think that's a good point. A lot of the friends that even aren't even in food industry, or even in other industries and like other types of jobs, are finding that like being in Boston is like slowly becoming unsustainable, and like something's got to give in terms of whether it's rent or like livability, and then that kind of goes off into the conversation of other entrepreneurs, people who are waiting the wings, who haven't, invested in brick and mortars, because we do have a lot of other friends and other potential entrepreneurs who are, rightfully so terrified to open up a brick and mortar because that risk is just too high. The cost of services, and for everyone and everything is going up exponentially. It's kind of insane. Doing business isn't what it was pre-COVID, and even then it was still pretty expensive. So sorry.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that prevents even the food scene from blossoming even further, because I think we have diversity here, but I still even think that Boston could have more food diversity. We look at other markets and other areas in the United States. I know you say like DC, and your brother they see even more different types of foods and cuisines and experiences there.
Oh yeah, the commentary is even more dramatic. That now we're getting into race and systemic racism,
right,
and all that. I think that's another ugly truth
underlying factor
as well.
Right.
The fact that I think anyone that lives here, you can name a neighborhood in Boston, and you can kind of picture who
lives there.
And that's a problem, right? That's a very big systemic kind of problem that I think the city. I think more and more people are aware of it, and there's now action to try to address it. But I mean, for as progressive as cities as we are, the wealth disparity between certain kind of communities is jarring, and I think it all folds into one another, right? With access to resources, opportunity, etc. We need to close the gap. We need to break some of the institutional kind of racism that exists. No one's going around, hopefully, at least throwing racial slurs out. That's like overt lazy racism, right? I don't think Boston really has too much of a problem there, but I think a lot of it is old world institutional access to resources, and the unsaid behind closed doors who's making the decisions on who gets an opportunity, and etc. And I think that's where Boston has a lot of work to do.
Awesome. Appreciate you guys so much. You guys have been really good guests, actually, and I hope this wasn't too crazy for you guys.
No, this is fun.
That's fun.
Thanks
Yeah.
for having us.
Yeah, thank you guys.